Okay, folks, we're going to look today at the early webcomics of Jon Del Arroz. Now, I first came into contact with Jon Del Arroz when he released a video on ISOM #1 called A Professional Comic Book Writer's Honest Review of ISOM #1. Now, pro tip, the only reason you ever need to add honest to your review title is if it's not going to be honest. And let me tell you, Jon Del Arroz's review is completely along those lines. Here's what he had to say. Art is fantastic. Dialogue is great. World building is good. Good comic. Really solid. Really nothing to complain about. Holy God. Really? Art is fantastic. Let's just examine these three statements in succession. Art is fantastic. He holds up this segment from ISOM #1 as an example of quality, saying, very nice art all the way around, pretty good action, different feelings of motion throughout, quality comic right there. Apparently not realizing he's holding up one of the major art fuck-ups in the book. Here is two characters about to collide in midair, and we're waiting to see, just what an earth-shaking collision that's going to be, and instead, the next panel shows us them skidding backwards, as if it all took place off-panel. There is not a single serious comic book reader who approached this comic, found this in there, and did not go, what the fuck? So, yeah, you just held up as an example of quality the least amount of quality in the book. The biggest counter example to quality in the book. My God. Dialogue is great, is it? Dialogue is good all the way around. I really didn't see any cringy moments of dialogue. A+, 10 out of 10. Alright, I will say that the dialogue in ISOM is for the most part good, and I didn't see anything that was tremendously cringy either. But to say it's A+, 10 out of 10 is really overselling it, and it's missing some of the really obvious errors. For example, when you go to some place that you haven't been to before, do you ask for a person just by his first name? Darren wouldn't happen to be around, would he? Oh, he would have let us know if he was expecting someone. Shoot him an email. How is it that anyone knows who he's talking about? Everyone acts like Darren Fontano is the only person named Darren in the whole freaking city of Florespark. How about throwing in Darren's last name? In fact, how about throwing it into somewhere in the damn book, because we actually don't learn Darren's last name until like the latter half of ISOM #2, which is ridiculous since he's supposed to be the villain of ISOM #1 and #2. Oh my God. Next, we have this exchange between Avery and Yaira. Yaira says, why are you dressed like you're undercover? And Avery thinks, undercover? That idiot thinks this is a sting? Who on earth is fighting someone and calling that person that something or other? You're in an intimate fighting relationship with someone. The word that's there should be this. I mean, just imagine if Avery here was thinking to himself, that woman thinks this is a sting. I'm putting it in these terms because I want you to realize that somebody who is fighting a woman is never going to refer to her as that, as if she's something separate from the immediate scene. He's going to say, this woman thinks this is a sting, and therefore this idiot thinks this is a sting, is the more appropriate form of the dialogue here. And then we have this little gem. Do they have girls around the spot? What the hell is emphasis even doing on that word? Do they have girls around the spot? Doesn't look like much of a strip joint. Well, that's because it's not, but that spot is the spot. I doubt drinks are the only thing on the menu. Okay, did that sound like sensible dialogue at all? No, it didn't. Why? Because this emphasis ought to be on that instance of the spot. Okay, now see the switch and hear the dialogue. Do they have girls around the spot? Doesn't look like much of a strip joint. That's because it's not, but that spot is the spot. I doubt drinks are the only thing on the menu. Okay, now the dialogue makes sense. So selling it as an A+, 10 out of 10 dialogue when there are clear errors throughout, yeah, don't do that. World building is good. This one just about makes me want to facepalm my damn forehead in. We don't know exactly the total global landscape of the world, but if you look at the early comics, Batman, Superman, they're very limited in scope, just like this. On that level, I think the world building was pretty good, an 8.5 out of 10 on the world building level. Really? Okay, two problems with this argument. Number one, the reason those early comics got away with keeping their scopes limited is that nothing significant changed on the global scale. If you looked at the wider world, you saw Earth as it usually is. But that's not true for the Rippaverse, which is set on an Earth where the United States is broken up into about 7 different nations, and Texas is one of those nations. And for some godforsaken reason, Texas cops wear green. Don't ask me why, that's never actually been established. We've never even seen the Texas flag. So, you can get away with not doing world building if you can assume default world building. But if all you're going to do is let your readers think the world is normal when it's not, you're misleading your readers. The other problem is that they had the opportunity to do that global world building on the first couple of pages of ISOM number 1. But we don't even get local world building in those couple of pages. I mean, my God, those pages focus on a particular police officer and the people surrounding him, and we never even get the lead police officer's name and rank. He's just there. And we never even get his name until Yaira number 1, where he shows up for no freaking reason at all. And we don't even get his rank in that book. So, world building, good? No, seriously not. So all of this stuff that he says, art is fantastic, dialogue is great, world building is good comic, really solid, really nothing to complain about. Total bullshit. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, I hope this guy does not write as well as he reviews. Because honestly, these are two different skill sets. You can be a good writer and you can be a shit reviewer. And the reason being is that a professional writer, is not necessarily a professional reader. That's what an editor has to be. An editor has to be a professional reader who has to see the flaws that are in the comic books that these writers put out. For example, the book Flying Sparks, and here's where I'm making the argument that he just doesn't have those professional reader skills. I looked at the first few pages of Flying Sparks, and although I'm not going to highlight any of them here, if you want to see my actual critique of the review of the first few pages of Flying Sparks, you'll need to go back to my video called Why Eric July Isn't Getting Good Feedback, because it is about Jon Del Arroz putting out this ass-kissing interview for him, and then basically skipping over everything that's wrong with his book. And I think, honestly, the reason he doesn't see anything wrong in Eric July's book is that from his own book, Flying Sparks, which is the only superhero book that I know of his, well, no, except for one that I'll be showing you earlier as a webcomic, he doesn't see the flaws in his own book. And so I will show you those flaws in that review video, Why Eric July Isn't Getting Good Feedback. Go ahead and look that up, watch that, and you can come back to here. But in that, I basically say, look, it's the blind leading the blind. If he can't see the flaws in his own book and he let it go to print looking like that, then there's no way he's going to see anything in Eric July's book. So one of the things that I didn't know about Flying Sparks, and I found this to be very interesting, is that it actually started out life as a webcomic. And so webcomics are done a little differently than regular comics, in that you expect a regular comic to be flipping from left to right. You're going a page at a time from left to right. Webcomics are done a little different. Like, for example, the page you see on the right-hand side here is from the comic book volume, and so it's all a coherent page. But if you look at it on the webcomic form that it was originally printed in, you get a sequence of disjointed panels where this tall panel is one panel, and then you have 4 independent panels following after that. And then those, in order to make it into comic book form, get assembled and edited all into one page. Now, it is still valid to edit this, because the finished product is a comic book, it's still valid to edit this according to comic book style and terms and all those kinds of things. So I may go back at some point and look at Flying Sparks and continue my review. But I didn't want to do that for the comics of his that were just webcomics. For example, in the recent days, he had this beef going with Ethan Van Sciver where they were both calling each other's work a bunch of crap, and Ethan Van Sciver in particular picked on this one called Clockwork Dancer. And Clockwork Dancer looked like the story of some inventor who had created this automaton in human form, and Ethan just pounded on it, saying this was garbage, the artwork was terrible, the writing was terrible, blah, blah, blah. But he only showed a couple of pages from it, and I didn't think that that was a very fair presentation. So I wanted to see this for myself, and it just so happens that Jon Del Arroz has a page on Archiving Comics where most of his earlier work actually resides. So you'll be able to see his work on various comics, web comics, on this page, and I will put the Archiving Comics page link on my video description so that you can check these out for yourself. But I was able to access these. You can access them for free. And what I found was that you've got kind of a lively little story here of a former investigator for Queen Victoria's Secret Service force who is also into high technology and using electric little drones like you see these spider webs. I mean, you could almost think of this guy as a goody the polymath, I guess, putting together these drones to hunt criminals. Now, this guy gets mixed up with a criminal mastermind who has it in his idea that, hey, I could actually create real life. I just need one last thing in order to forward the process. Well, this guy procures the last thing, and he actually brings this automaton to life. But because this is considered an abomination against God and the state, which I think are like one and the same thing in this particular world, he winds up going on the run from his former detective counterpart, and things ensue from there. So it's a much more involved story than Ethan Van Sciver would have led us to believe. It's not the greatest thing since sliced bread. I would say that the art very, very much does have a primitive style, but it does tell the story for the most part, and the story itself carries you along, even though there's some bits of predictability in there. So I don't find it to be the complete piece of garbage that Ethan Van Sciver made it out to be. Same goes for DYNAMITE THOR. He also referred to this one as just utter trash. And the problem is that DYNAMITE THOR is a Golden Age public domain character that was created by Wright Lincoln. He's a wealthy mine owner who uses sticks of dynamite to fight crime. I mean, literally, he's throwing sticks of dynamite around, like at a water tower, because he's going to use the water tower to block this car's escape. He also has the habit of traveling around the city by running on power lines. I have no idea why that's supposed to be any faster than getting around on just regular foot, but there you have it. So you've got this Golden Age character, and the Golden Age, by and large, these were really silly books. I mean, they were called funny books for a reason, and it's usually because they were just kind of on the goofy side. And so when DYNAMITE THOR is reinterpreted for a modern age by Jon Del Arroz, he deliberately keeps that goofiness in there, in the comic, so that you can enjoy it just like it's a Golden Age comic, but reinterpreted for modern times. The kid finds out that his grandfather was the superhero DYNAMITE THOR, who was able to use small explosives, and he also had a personal immunity to explosives that this kid inherited, so that one day he might take up the mantle. And indeed, he does decide to take up the mantle of DYNAMITE THOR and become a superhero. And he goes through flying, propelling himself with small explosions behind him, which does not leave the place that he left in very good shape. And he throws sticks of dynamite around, and then he says quirky catchphrase things like "villainy defeated." And Yeah, it is goofy, but it's the kind of goofy fun you would have gotten from a Golden Age comic in those days. And so you can't fault Del Arroz for transporting that kind of spirit into the modern comic. I think that was the whole idea. So Dynamite Thor was another kind of enjoyable entry in the early work. And the last one that I reviewed was Deus Vult, and that I found particularly interesting, especially in light of Jon Del Arroz's current fascination with Christian nationalism. But this tells the story of a crusader, a Spanish crusader, who is trying to get a message to a general in the by trekking through the mountains, and he is treated to a vision in which he's invited to come find the Holy Grail. Now, this vision turns out to be the work of a demon, and he's saved by this cat lady, who then tells him that the real Holy Grail is somewhere in her realm and in the possession of a demon king. And of course, he runs afoul of this demon king and then must go into the demon king's own lair dimension in order to find the Grail. So, this is a standard comic in the same kind of line of enjoyment as Conan the Barbarian and Red Sonja, just with a Christian crusader at the helm in the protagonist's spot. And it again is one of these that you just enjoy it for what it is. This story does have some problems in that when it bifurcates into kind of two tracks in the middle of the story, and you've got the protagonist invading the Devil King's realm on one hand, and then you've got the friends of the protagonist who he's saved from oppression in their realm, basically distracting the Devil King by raising a rebellion. You kind of forget that there's two tracks going on. And so when you jump back to the other track, it's like, wait a minute, was something supposed to be happening back here? I don't even remember these characters. I don't remember what they were supposed to be doing. That's just a problem with the nature of the episodic nature of webcomics, and the fact that the comic book could have been structured a little bit better. But otherwise, it was another enjoyable entry. And so when I got done reading all four of these, well, I haven't really read much of Flying Sparks yet, but reading the latter three, at least, of these early webcomics, and I kept myself from reading the other ones that were on his page because they looked like more sci-fi, and because his latest offering, which I'm going to be reviewing, is Overmind, and it's a sci-fi book, I wanted to avoid looking at those other properties of his, the earlier properties, just in case he reuses any of the ideas from those in Overmind. I wanted everything in Overmind to be fresh to me. Especially since he's basically holding up Overmind and the Terran Imperium, which is the overarching story in which Overmind and the lead character Ayla Rin, who you see on the cover there, inhabits. It's supposed to be kind of a right-wing answer to Star Wars, and boy, if you're going to go after Star Wars with your property, I mean, if you're coming for the king, you better not miss. And so I wanted to make sure I was seeing Overmind in as positive a light as possible. And now that I've gone through and read some of Jon Del Arroz's earlier work, I think I have a more positive estimation, or at least a positive forecast for how this book's going to turn out, because he is at least capable of coming up with some inventive stories that can lead you along and at least give you a good time. And if Overmind can do that, then maybe we'll see something that can actually rival Cyberfrog, which is currently dominating in my rankings of comics that I've read so far. So Overmind and its sequel, The Hidden Emperor, are going to be on my list of comics to review in the near future. I may go back and take a look at Flying Sparks. I'm supposed to get a PDF version of Volume 1 as part of the stretch goals of the Hidden Emperor campaign. I haven't quite received that yet, so hopefully that's on its way. And then, but in the immediate future, I'm going to be looking at, I'm actually going to be looking at Project 2025 this weekend. I'll be reading through that. I'm into like the 7th of about 30-something chapters of that political document from the Heritage Foundation that all the Democrats are up in arms about because they think it's going to turn Trump into a dictator. And I've already read enough of it to know that that's not the case. But it's just kind of funny to see what actually is in there, and I'm going to do a report on that. But I just wanted to go through and do a quick survey on these early webcomics from Jon Del Arroz. I mean, it does look like on the surface he's a much better writer of his own comics than he is a reviewer of comics like ISOM. So that's good to know, and I'm hopeful about what I'm going to read from him in hopefully the near future. So that's all for today. I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and I will talk to you later.